Somewhere deep in your walls or underneath your porch or moving silently through the shadows of your garden at night, there is an animal that operates almost entirely by smell, not by sight, not by sound, but by scent. The rat's nose is one of the most sophisticated olfactory systems in the natural world. It can detect odors at concentrations so low they are invisible to any instrument humans designed before the 21st century. Rats don't just smell food, they smell danger. They smell shelter. They smell whether a space is safe to raise their young, whether a territory is occupied, or whether a predator passed through 3 days ago. And here is what almost nobody talks about. There are certain plants, specific plants, whose chemical signatures are so deeply threatening to the rat nervous system that these animals will physically reroute their paths to avoid them. Not because of poison, not because of a trap, simply because of scent. Ancient grain farmers in Egypt knew this. Medieval European monasteries cultivated specific herb gardens, not just for cooking and medicine, but as a living chemical barrier around their food stores. Farmers in China, in India, and in the Mediterranean all independently arrived at the same knowledge across centuries. Certain plants make rats deeply, instinctively uncomfortable. Modern science now knows exactly why. Volatile organic compounds, essential oil chemistry, and neurological interference with the rat's olfactory receptors. What the ancients understood intuitively, biochemists can now explain molecule by molecule. And yet, most homeowners today reach immediately for poison pellets or snap traps, completely unaware that their grandmother's garden might have been doing the job all along. One of the plants on this list was traditionally grown in rings around granaries in southern Europe. Rats would not cross the perimeter, not a single one. Another plant on this list contains a compound that researchers now understand actively disrupts the way rats communicate danger signals to each other. It does not harm them. It simply scrambles the signal. They become confused, disoriented in that space, and they leave. The last plant on this list is the one most people have never considered. It grows almost anywhere. It requires almost no care, and it may be the single most effective natural rat deterrent that exists. That one is worth waiting for. Before getting into the list, it is worth understanding one fundamental truth about rat behavior, because it changes how you think about every plant that follows. Rats are not brave explorers. They are profoundly risk-averse creatures. Every new space they enter is assessed first by smell. Is there a predator here? Is there competition? Is there something chemically wrong with this environment? When a rat encounters a plant compound it finds threatening, the response is not curiosity, it is avoidance. It doesn't investigate further. It turns around and finds somewhere else to be. The plants in this list work because they produce essential oils and volatile compounds that either mimic predator scent markers, overwhelm and confuse the rat's olfactory system, or trigger a hardwired neurological aversion response that the rat cannot override through learned behavior. They are not a complete solution on their own, but planted strategically around a garden, around a home's foundation, near compost heaps or vegetable patches, they create an environment that rats simply do not want to be in. These are not folk tales. These are plants with documented chemical properties and thousands of years of agricultural history behind them. 1. Mentha piperita. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the smell of peppermint, that sharp, cooling, almost electric wave that hits the back of your sinuses immediately. For a human, it is refreshing, invigorating even. For a rat, it is overwhelming, suffocating, and physically painful. The active compound responsible is menthol. Peppermint essential oil contains menthol concentrations of up to 40%, and this compound interacts with a TRPM8 receptor, a cold-sensing ion channel in the nervous system. In rats, overstimulation of this receptor creates a strong aversion response. The sensation is not pleasant curiosity, it is distress. But menthol is only part of the story. Peppermint oil also contains menthone, menthol acetate, and a range of secondary terpene compounds that together create a chemical environment the rat's brain classifies as dangerous. In the wild, concentrations of volatile terpenes at that intensity often signal decomposition or toxic plant matter. The rat's nervous system has evolved to move away from those signals, not toward them. Ancient Romans cultivated peppermint extensively, and documented its use in protecting stored goods. It was strewn across floors of storage rooms and woven into the thatching of granary roofs. Medieval apothecaries recommended it for keeping vermin from herb stores. This was not superstition. It was applied observation across generations. Plant peppermint along the base of your home's exterior walls, particularly near any area where pipes or cables enter the foundation. Plant it densely along garden borders. It spreads aggressively, which in this case is exactly what you want. A solid mat of peppermint along a fence line creates a scent corridor that rats are extraordinarily reluctant to cross. One important note, peppermint is invasive. Plant it in containers or use landscape edging to prevent it from taking over. That tendency to spread, however, is the very thing that makes it effective as a barrier plant. It fills space quickly and maintains a consistent chemical presence throughout the season. It grows in almost any soil. It tolerates partial shade. It produces new growth rapidly after cutting. So trimming it regularly, which releases a burst of fresh volatile compounds, actually increases its effectiveness rather than reducing it. 2. Lavandula angustifolia. There is a particular quality to the air above a lavender field in peak bloom. It is thick and sweet and slightly camphorous, a scent that has been described across cultures as calming, sacred, and clean. Humans have used lavender in ceremony and medicine for more than 2,000 years. Rats find it repulsive. The primary volatile compounds in lavender, linalool, linaloyl acetate, and camphor, are individually mild to the human nose. Together in the concentration produced by a dense lavender planting, they create a chemical signal that rodents are neurologically programmed to avoid. Linalool, in particular, has been studied extensively in pest research. It functions as a natural insecticide and has documented repellent effects on a range of pest species. In rodent studies, it has been shown to influence behavioral avoidance. Animals exposed to linalool-heavy environments spend significantly less time in those zones and show elevated stress markers when forced to remain. The camphor component adds another layer. Camphor is a terpene compound that interacts with the rat olfactory system in a manner similar to menthol, triggering receptors associated with chemical irritation rather than pleasant scent. To a rat's nose, a lavender hedge is not beautiful. It is a chemical warning signal. Medieval French farmers planted lavender along the perimeters of their kitchen gardens as a matter of course, not primarily for its beauty or fragrance, but because they had observed across generations that rats did not nest in lavender. The practice was so common, it was considered basic agricultural knowledge. Lavender is one of the most garden-friendly plants on this list. It is drought-tolerant once established, thrives in poor, well-drained soil, and produces its heaviest concentration of volatile compounds during long, hot summers, exactly the season when rat populations peak. Planted in full sun along walkways, near entry points, and as border edging around vegetable gardens. It takes 1 to 3 years to reach adult size, but even young plants produce meaningful chemical output. And unlike peppermint, lavender stays exactly where you put it, a well-behaved perennial that earns its place in the garden for decades. The scent of lavender drifting through a summery evening is one of the great pleasures of a garden. It is quietly, gently, and continuously doing something else entirely. 3. Taget's species. This one surprises people. Marigolds are so common, so ordinary seeming, so present at every garden center in spring. Little plastic pots of orange and yellow that most gardeners treat them as cheerful filler, something to brighten up a border, an afterthought. But marigolds have been companion planted by agricultural cultures on nearly every inhabited continent for reasons that go far beyond aesthetics. The ancient Aztecs cultivated tagetes extensively and documented their protective properties. Colonial-era gardeners in England planted them around vegetable plots as a matter of standard practice. African farmers have used Tagetes minuta, the Mexican marigold, as a natural pest barrier for centuries. The chemistry behind this is real and well understood. Tagetes species produce a class of compounds called thiophenies, sulfur-based organic molecules with intensely sharp, pungent chemical signatures. To the human nose at normal distance, marigolds simply smell like marigolds. Slightly tangy, slightly bitter. To a rat perceiving scent at concentrations orders of magnitude more sensitive, a dense planting of marigolds produces a chemical environment dominated by sulfur compounds that register as aversive at the neurological level. There is also the root chemistry to consider. Marigold roots produce and release alpha-terthionol, a thiophene compound with documented nematicidal properties. This root exudate changes the soil chemistry in the immediate area. The rats that dig, and all rats dig, encounter this compound through their skin and mucous membranes during burrowing. It is not lethal, it is simply deeply unpleasant. Plant marigolds densely. A single plant here and there accomplishes little. A solid row of French marigolds along the base of a vegetable garden fence, or a ring of African marigolds around the perimeter of a raised bed, creates meaningful chemical coverage. They grow quickly from seed, flower prolifically, and self-seed readily in warmer climates, meaning once you establish them, they tend to come back on their own. And they happen to be one of the most effective companion plants for vegetables in general, deterring whitefly, aphids, and nematodes while drawing in beneficial pollinators. They are working constantly on multiple levels in ways that quietly make everything around them healthier. There is something almost poetic about that. The humble marigold, the most overlooked plant in the garden center, turns out to be doing more work than almost anything else in the border. 4. Artemisia absinthium. Wormwood is a plant that appears repeatedly in the household guides of medieval households. Always noted near granaries, always mentioned near food storage, always described as a plant that vermin would not go near. Wormwood is not a gentle plant. It is chemical warfare in botanical form. The primary compound responsible is absinthin, a sesquiterpene lactone so intensely bitter that it is detectable by the human palate at a concentration of 1 part in 70,000. It is by most measures the most bitter compound found in any plant species. But bitterness is only what humans experience. Rats process wormwood through their olfactory system first. The volatile oils in wormwood, absinthiol, thujone, azulene, and a complex mixture of additional terpene compounds, produce a scent profile that registers as acutely aversive to rodents. Thujone in particular has neurotoxic properties at high doses, and the rat's nervous system appears to have evolved a strong avoidance response to plants producing it, an adaptive behavior that protects them from accidental exposure. The ancient Egyptians listed wormwood in agricultural documents dating back over 3,000 years, specifically in the context of protecting grain stores. Roman agricultural writers similarly recommended it for storage areas. Medieval European granaries frequently had wormwood planted along their exterior walls, sometimes in dense hedging. This was not coincidence. It was accumulated agricultural intelligence passed down through generations of direct observation. Wormwood grows to about 1 meter in height and produces distinctive silvery gray-green foliage with a strong, complex, slightly medicinal fragrance. It is extremely drought-tolerant, thrives in poor soils and full sun, and requires almost no maintenance once established. It produces volatile compounds continuously throughout the growing season, with peak output during the hottest months. Planted along fence lines, at the corners of property boundaries, near compost heaps, and around the perimeter of any structure where rats have been active or might shelter. Be aware that wormwood produces allelopathic compounds through its roots, meaning it suppresses the growth of nearby plants. Keep it away from vegetable beds and give neighboring ornamentals some space. It is not the most neighborly plant in the garden. It stakes out its territory chemically and defends it, which is in this context precisely the point. 5. Allium sativum. The garlic bulb is one of the most chemically complex food plants on the planet. Inside each clove, 2 compounds are kept physically separate from each other, alliin and the enzyme alliinase. The moment the clove is damaged, sliced, crushed, bruised, or bitten, those compounds combine and produce allicin. That sharp, sulfurous, penetrating scent that fills a kitchen is allicin releasing into the air. To a human cook, it is appetite. To a rat, it is alarm. Allicin belongs to a class of organosulfur compounds that produce some of the most intense volatile signatures in the plant world. The rat's highly developed olfactory system, which relies on sulfur-based scent markers for a wide range of critical environmental signals, including predator detection, responds to allicin, with what researchers describe as a strong, unconditioned aversive response. It does not need to learn that garlic is unpleasant. The response is built in. Garlic has been used as a pest deterrent across virtually every agricultural culture on the planet that cultivated it, which, given garlic's geographic spread, means most of them. Ancient Chinese agricultural texts recommended it near grain storage. Egyptian records mention it in pest management contexts. Indian traditional agriculture uses it extensively as a companion plant. As a garden plant for rat deterrents, garlic has several distinct advantages. It grows underground, meaning the main chemical payload is in the soil, exactly where rats dig and burrow. The leaves and stems release volatile compounds when brushed or damaged, as a rat moving through the planting would inevitably do. And crushed garlic mixed with water makes an effective spray that can be applied around garden boundaries. As a supplementary measure, plant garlic cloves in autumn for a late spring harvest, or obtain potted garlic plants from nurseries for spring planting. Use it densely along the edges of vegetable gardens, near compost areas, and around the base of raised beds. It is, of course, also food, which means garlic borders are doing double duty in any kitchen garden, providing both a meaningful chemical deterrent presence and a harvest of one of the most versatile and health-promoting foods in human cuisine. 6. Salvia rosmarinus. Before science gave it a systematic explanation, Mediterranean farmers gave it a practical one. Plant rosemary near the granary, and the rats will find somewhere else to be. This was documented behavior across agricultural communities in southern France, northern Italy, coastal Spain, and the Greek islands for centuries. Rosemary was not planted near food stores for its beauty, though it is beautiful. It was planted because it worked. The chemistry is now well characterized. Rosemary produces a dense, complex mixture of volatile terpene compounds: camphor, camphene, alpha-pinene, and most significantly, 1,8-cineol, also known as eucalyptol. This compound is the dominant volatile in several of the world's most intensely aromatic plants, and it functions as a powerful natural pesticide and repellent across a wide range of pest species. In rodents, 1,8-cineol and the camphor fraction of rosemary oil have been shown to produce strong olfactory aversion. The sheer density of volatile output from a mature rosemary shrub, especially in warm weather when the sun heats the foliage and drives off the essential oils, creates a chemical fog that rats find deeply hostile. Rosemary is also remarkably practical as a garden plant. It is a perennial evergreen in most temperate climates, meaning it provides chemical coverage year-round. Not just during the growing season, it is drought-tolerant, thrives in poor, well-drained soils, and becomes increasingly bushy and dense with age. A mature rosemary shrub can reach 1 and 1 or 2 meters in height and spread nearly as wide, creating a substantial physical and chemical barrier. Planted at corners of raised beds, along pathways, near doorways and entry points of structures, and flanking any areas where rat activity has been observed. In colder climates where rosemary does not overwinter outdoors, it can be grown in large containers that are brought inside during frost and returned to strategic outdoor positions in spring. Running a hand along rosemary foliage and releasing that wave of resinous, piney, medicinal scent, there is something grounding about it, something old. It is a scent that has surrounded human homes and food stores for millennia. And part of the reason it became so embedded in domestic life may have been exactly this: that it kept things safe, that it quietly held a perimeter. Chitori 7, Sambucus. This is the one, not because it is the most famous, not because it is the most commonly recommended. In fact, most modern pest control advice does not mention it at all. But the historical record is striking, and the chemistry behind it is among the most sophisticated on this list. In rural communities across northern and central Europe, from England through Germany into Poland and Ukraine, the elder tree occupied a specific and deeply intentional position in the landscape. It was planted at the edge of property near outbuildings, adjacent to root cellars and grain stores. In some regions, felling an elder without good reason was considered deeply unwise. Not for mystical reasons, but because the elder was known to do something important. It kept the rats away. The elder produces a complex chemistry throughout all parts of the plant. The leaves and bark contain sambonigrin and other cyanogenic glycosides, compounds that release hydrogen cyanide when the plant tissue is damaged. This is not dangerous to humans at normal exposure levels, but rats, processing the environment through olfactory receptors, evolved to detect chemical danger signals, register the cyanogenic chemistry of elderberry foliage as a serious threat. The volatile chemistry of damaged elder leaves in particular, the acrid, unusual scent that is quite distinct from most garden plants, appears to trigger a hardwired avoidance response. The bark and leaves also contain significant concentrations of triterpene compounds and flavonoids, whose volatile signatures contribute to an overall chemical profile that rats find actively aversive, not merely neutral. Elder grows in almost any soil condition. It tolerates wet and dry extremes. It establishes rapidly, often reaching 3 meters within just 2 to 3 years. It self-seeds prolifically. In many environments, once you establish one elder, it begins to colonize naturally, spreading slowly but steadily along fence lines and property edges, exactly the areas where its chemical presence is most useful. And it is a generous plant in other ways. The flowers produce the distinctive elderflower fragrance, beloved in cordials, syrups, and teas. The berries, when properly prepared, never eaten raw, as raw elderberries contain active compounds that cause nausea, yield one of the most antioxidant-rich, immune-supportive foods in the Northern European botanical tradition. Elderberry preparations have been used in traditional medicine for respiratory support for centuries, and modern research has continued to find interesting properties in the berry compounds. A plant that feeds you, supports your health, and quietly keeps pests from your property while requiring almost nothing from you in return. Plant elder at the boundaries of your property, along fence lines, near any outbuildings, garden sheds, compost heaps, or areas where rats have established runs. Give it space, it becomes substantial over time, and then leave it alone. It knows what it is. The oldest farmers in Europe understood this. The plant has not changed, only the knowledge has faded. There is something that happens when you look closely at traditional agricultural practices, practices that were once considered folklore, superstition, the unscientific habits of uneducated peasants, and you begin to find the chemistry underneath them. You realize something uncomfortable. They knew. Not in the way that we now know with instruments and peer-reviewed methodology and molecular diagrams, but they knew through observation, through inheritance, through the accumulated practical wisdom of people who lived and died by the quality of their food stores and who could not afford to get it wrong. The rats were always there. They have followed human civilization for as long as there has been stored food. And somewhere in the accumulated response to that constant pressure, people found the plants. They found that certain scents created borders that rats would not cross. They planted those borders and passed the knowledge forward. And then somewhere in the transition to industrial agriculture and chemical pest control, that knowledge stopped being passed forward. It sat in old texts, in monastery garden plans, in the letters of country estate managers, in the planting records of medieval farmsteads. What this list represents is not new information, it is recovered information. The science validates what the observations discovered. It does not replace it. The beautiful reality of these 7 plants is that they cost very little. They require modest effort to establish. Most of them feed pollinators, provide herbs for your kitchen, and make your garden more beautiful in the process. And they work through the same chemical logic that was understood 600 years before the word biochemistry existed. Peppermint at the foundation, lavender at the borders, marigolds in dense rows around vegetable beds, wormwood along the fence line, garlic throughout the kitchen garden, rosemary flanking entry points and outbuildings, and elder, patient and substantial, standing at the edges of the property, doing what elders have always done, protecting what matters. There are no perfect solutions to rats. They are intelligent, adaptable, and persistent. But a garden built with these plants creates an environment that rats instinctively find hostile. Not through poison, not through traps, but through the oldest language there is, chemistry, scent, the slow, continuous conversation between plants and animals that has been happening for millions of years. You are not fighting nature when you plant these. You are joining it. If these ancient botanical secrets have changed the way you look at your garden borders, please subscribe and like this video. We are uncovering the natural wisdom that modern history has tried to bury. Let's plant the future together. The next hidden treasure of the natural world will be revealed soon.